Your cheap life jacket won't save anyone, Mr. Maintenance Man. The sleek corporate helicopter rocked violently as Miranda Chen, CEO of Pacific Tech, clutched her leather seat. Jack Torres, 38, gripped the emergency kit tighter. It's safety technician. And your pilot ignored my weather warning. I pay for results, not excuses. Lightning cracked outside. The pilot's voice crackled. Mayday, mayday. We're. The helicopter plunged. Jack lunged toward Miranda's seatbelt. Their eyes locked, terror meeting determination as the ocean rushed to meet them. His daughter's photo fluttered from his pocket onto the floor between them. Jack Torres woke at 4:30 every morning in his modest one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Seattle. The small space was meticulously organized, tools arranged by size, magnetic calendar filled with his daughter Sophie's school events, and a wall covered with her artwork. At 38, the lines around his eyes had deepened, but they still crinkled when he smiled at the photo of Sophie on his nightstand. The apartment smelled of coffee and motor oil, a combination that had become his signature scent after 15 years as a safety technician for Pacific Helicopter Tours. Jack's calloused hands moved with practiced precision as he prepared lunch for Sophie: peanut butter sandwich cut diagonally, apple slices arranged in a star pattern, and a handwritten note. Be brave today. Squirt. Dad's working late, but Miss Rodriguez will pick you up. Love you to the moon. Sophie was 10 now, with her mother's dark curls and Jack's stubborn chin. Cancer had taken Maria 3 years ago, leaving Jack to navigate the world of hair braiding and parent-teacher conferences alone. The child support from Maria's parents had stopped coming 6 months ago. Economic hardships, they'd said, forcing Jack to take on additional shifts and weekend work. Across the city, Miranda Chen's alarm chimed at 5:45 in her penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay. The 40-year-old CEO of Pacific Tech moved through her morning ritual with military precision: 20 minutes on the Peloton, 15 for her skincare routine, 10 for her protein smoothie. Her closet resembled a high-end boutique, organized by designer and color scheme. Today she selected a charcoal Armani suit. Power meetings required power clothing. The morning news played in the background as her assistant texted the day's schedule. Board meeting at 9, investor lunch at noon, helicopter to the Yakima facility at 3. Pacific Tech's new security software had positioned them for acquisition by a Chinese tech giant, a deal Miranda had orchestrated over 2 years of 80-hour weeks and sacrificed relationships. Her fingers brushed against the jade pendant hidden beneath her blouse, her mother's last gift before disappearing back to Beijing after the divorce. Never show weakness, she'd whispered while fastening it around 7-year-old Miranda's neck. The world doesn't forgive women who fail. At Pacific Helicopter Tours, Jack methodically inspected each aircraft, his worn leather logbook filled with detailed notes. His coworkers called him Triple Check Torres, but he ignored their teasing. Safety wasn't something to cut corners on, not when lives depended on it. Torres. His supervisor approached with a clipboard. VIP client this afternoon. Pacific Tech CEO needs to get to Yakima. Weather report looks sketchy, but she's insisting. Jack glanced at the dark clouds gathering over the Cascades. That's right in the storm path. We should reschedule. Client says it's non-negotiable. Annual facility inspection that can't be postponed. The supervisor lowered his voice. She's paying triple. Company needs this contract, Torres. Jack's jaw tightened as he thought of Sophie's upcoming school fees and the past due notice on their rent. I'll do another check on the Bell 429. And I'm going with them as safety technician. Your call. Flight leaves at 3. Don't piss off the rich lady, all right? She's known for chewing up maintenance guys. That afternoon, Miranda arrived at the helipad precisely on time, trailed by 2 assistants frantically taking notes as she dictated instructions. The jade pendant pressed against her collarbone. A board member had questioned her acquisition strategy that morning, suggesting perhaps a more measured approach was needed. The implication was clear: they doubted her. The pilot greeted her with a practiced smile, but Miranda barely acknowledged him as she scanned her emails. The maintenance man, safety technician, whatever, was securing an emergency kit in the rear compartment. Something about his methodical movements caught her attention. Unlike her employees who scrambled nervously in her presence, his hands remained steady, focused on the task rather than her approval. Is there a problem? She asked sharply, noticing his frown as he checked his weather app. Storms intensified. I've recommended postponing, but apparently that's not an option. His voice carried no apology, just fact. Miranda's eyes narrowed. I don't pay for opinions on my schedule, Mr. Torres. Jack Torres. He secured the final strap, then held up a life vest. You'll need to wear this. I've flown helicopters since before you were changing oil, she said dismissively. Regulations don't care about your resume, Miss Chen. He extended the vest again, expression unchanged. For a moment, Miranda considered having him removed from the flight. But time was pressing, and finding another technician would delay them further. She snatched the vest with a tight smile. As they boarded, Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Good luck with the scary storm, Dad. I'll make mac and cheese when you get home." Miranda's phone chimed simultaneously. The acquisition team needed her signature on amended documents before the Chinese contingent's morning meeting. Two worlds, separated by income and influence, about to collide in the gathering storm. The helicopter lifted off into increasingly ominous skies. Miranda sat rigidly, typing furiously on her tablet while occasionally glancing at the darkening clouds with obvious irritation. Jack secured himself in the rear seat, emergency kit between his feet, constantly checking the weather radar on his phone. 20 minutes into the flight, the helicopter began to shudder as they encountered the storm's edge. The pilot's voice crackled through the headsets. "Might get bumpy, folks. Storms moved faster than predicted." Jack leaned forward. "We should turn back. This system's intensifying." The pilot glanced nervously between Jack and Miranda, clearly torn between safety protocols and the expectations of a high-paying client. Miranda didn't look up from her tablet. "We proceed. I have a 5 p.m. meeting that can't be rescheduled." "With respect, Miss Chen, weather doesn't care about your meeting schedule," Jack said, his voice level but firm. Miranda finally looked up, her eyes cold. "Your cheap life jacket won't save anyone, Mr. Maintenance Man. I've been through worse turbulence in my corporate jet. It's safety technician. And your pilot ignored my weather warning. I pay for results, not excuses." The helicopter lurched violently, sending Miranda's tablet sliding across the floor. Jack instinctively reached for it, handing it back without comment. Their fingers brushed momentarily. "Thank you," Miranda muttered reflexively, then seemed annoyed at her own politeness. The pilot's voice tightened. "Miss Chen, Mr. Torres is right. This storm is." Lightning cracked nearby, illuminating the cabin in harsh white light. The controls sparked. Alarms blared as the engine sputtered. "Mayday? Mayday. We're losing power." The pilot fought the controls as the helicopter began spinning. Jack moved instantly, securing emergency straps around himself and lunging toward Miranda. "Brace position. Now." For once, Miranda followed instructions without argument, her usual composure cracking as the aircraft plummeted. Jack reached for her seatbelt, checking it was secure. Their eyes locked, terror meeting determination, as the ocean rushed to meet them. His daughter's photo fluttered from his pocket onto the floor between them. The impact was violent. Cold water rushed in immediately. Jack's safety training took over. He grabbed the emergency kit, released Miranda's belt, and pulled her toward the exit as the cabin rapidly filled with seawater. The pilot was slumped forward, unresponsive despite Jack's shouts. "The pilot!" Miranda yelled, reaching toward the front. "He's gone. We have seconds before this sinks." Jack forced the door open against rushing water. "We can't just. Now." Jack pushed her through the opening, following immediately after with the emergency kit clutched to his chest. The helicopter disappeared beneath the waves moments later. Frigid Pacific waters assaulted them, as Jack deployed the emergency raft with practiced efficiency. He hauled Miranda in first, then pulled himself aboard, both gasping and shivering. "The pilot," Miranda repeated, staring at the empty water where the helicopter had vanished. "Nothing we could do." Jack's voice was hollow as he began inventorying the emergency supplies. "He was gone on impact." "You don't know that. We should have tried. I've seen enough accidents to know." Jack's tone hardened. "If we'd stayed 10 more seconds, we'd be at the bottom with him." Miranda fell silent, hugging herself against the cold as rain pelted them. Jack pulled emergency blankets from the kit, wrapping one around her shoulders without asking permission. His wedding ring caught the dim light, as he moved a simple band he still wore 3 years after Maria's death. "Your hand is bleeding," Miranda observed. Jack glanced down at the gash across his palm he hadn't noticed. "It's nothing." "That doesn't look like nothing." He ignored her, focusing instead on their situation. The storm was pushing them southwest, away from the mainland. Their emergency beacon was active, but with the storm's interference, rescue would be challenging. Jack pulled out a compass and water-resistant map, trying to calculate their position. "How bad is it?" Miranda asked, reading his expression. "We're drifting toward a small island chain. If we're lucky, we might wash up somewhere with fresh water." "If we're lucky? That's your professional assessment? Don't you people have protocols for this?" Jack looked up, patience thinning. "Yes. The protocol is don't fly into storms. But here we are. Don't you dare blame me for." I don't have time for this. Jack cut her off, pointing to dark shapes emerging through the rain. Islands ahead. We need to paddle. For hours they fought the current, Miranda initially awkward but quickly matching Jack's rhythm. As they approached the shoreline, massive waves threatened to capsize them. Jack tied their emergency supplies together and secured them to his belt. If we flip, swim for shore. Don't fight the current, move diagonally, he shouted over the wind. The inevitable happened yards from the beach, a massive wave overturned their raft. Jack felt Miranda's grip tear away from his arm as they were plunged underwater. He surfaced, frantically scanning for her. Chen, he shouted, spotting her struggling against the pull. I can't. She disappeared under another wave. Without hesitation, Jack swam toward her, fighting against the same current he'd warned her about. He reached her just as she resurfaced, coughing and panicked. Stop fighting it, he ordered, wrapping his arm around her waist. Diagonal, remember? Together they moved sideways with the current until its power lessened, then pushed toward shore. They collapsed on wet sand as darkness fell, the emergency kit miraculously still attached to Jack's belt. Miranda coughed up seawater, her designer suit ruined, mascara streaking down her face. You came back for me. That's the job, Jack replied simply, though it wasn't, not really. Your job ended when the helicopter crashed. Miranda studied him with new curiosity. You risked your life. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he retrieved Sophie's photograph, now water-damaged but still intact, from his pocket. Your daughter? Miranda asked quietly. Jack nodded, carefully placing the photo back in his pocket. We should find shelter before hypothermia sets in. As they gathered themselves to move inland, Miranda noticed Jack wincing as he lifted the emergency kit. You're injured, she stated. I'm fine. No, you're not. Let me carry that. I said I'm fine. His voice left no room for argument. Miranda watched him limp ahead, realizing for the first time that perhaps her initial assessment of this maintenance man had been fundamentally flawed. By dawn, they had established a makeshift camp beneath a rocky overhang. The island was small, but densely forested, with a freshwater stream they'd discovered during their nighttime trek. Jack had managed to start a fire using the emergency kit's waterproof matches, and they dried their clothes as best they could. Miranda sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching Jack methodically organize their supplies. 3 days of emergency rations. A basic first aid kit, fishing line, a multi-tool, water purification tablets, and a signaling mirror. His movements were precise, despite his obvious exhaustion and pain. You should let me look at your leg, she said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since they'd reached shore. It's just a sprain. Jack didn't look up from his inventory. And your hand? She nodded toward the makeshift bandage he'd wrapped around his palm. Jack flexed his fingers stiffly. It'll heal. Not if it gets infected. Miranda moved closer, her tone shifting from suggestion to command. Show me. To her surprise, he complied, unwrapping the cloth to reveal a deep gash across his palm. It had stopped bleeding but looked angry and swollen. Miranda opened the first aid kit and found antiseptic wipes. This will hurt. I've had worse. His voice was matter-of-fact. As she cleaned the wound, she noticed other scars crisscrossing his hands, years of physical labor marked in his skin. Her own hands were smooth, maintained by weekly manicures and expensive creams. The photo, your daughter, what's her name? Miranda asked, partly to distract him from the pain. Sophie. His expression softened. She's 10. She has your eyes. But her mother's smile, thankfully. A shadow crossed his face. Is her mother? Miranda left the question hanging. Cancer. 3 years ago. Jack's jaw tightened. Pancreatic. By the time they caught it, she had months. Miranda's hands stilled momentarily. I'm sorry. Jack nodded once, accepting the sentiment without elaboration. Sophie stays with our neighbor when I work late shifts. Miss Rodriguez. Retired teacher. She'll be worried. Terrified, Jack corrected, looking toward the endless ocean. She's already lost her mother. The raw emotion in his voice struck Miranda unexpectedly. In her world, vulnerability was weaponized, never displayed so openly. The rescue teams will be searching, she offered, finishing the bandage. Pacific Tech has protocols for executive emergencies. Storm's still interfering with signals. And we're well off the flight path now. Jack was practical, not pessimistic. We should prepare to be here at least a few days. Miranda nodded, then winced as she shifted position. Jack noticed immediately. Your shoulder? He asked. It's nothing. She echoed his earlier dismissal. Jack raised an eyebrow. Doesn't look like nothing. Miranda reluctantly allowed him to examine her shoulder. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands so weathered. Dislocated, I think. Happened when we flipped? His eyes met hers, seeking confirmation. She nodded. Can you? I can reset it. Had to do it once for my climbing partner. Jack positioned himself behind her. On 3. 1. He pushed firmly before reaching 2, causing Miranda to gasp in pain and surprise as her shoulder popped back into place. You said on 3, she accused, rotating her arm gingerly. People tense up when they're counting. His matter-of-fact explanation carried no apology. Miranda found herself almost smiling. Sneaky. As the day progressed, they established a division of labor that played to their strengths. Jack focused on shelter improvements and collecting firewood, while Miranda, with her injured shoulder, gathered edible berries he identified and purified water from the stream. By afternoon, Jack had fashioned a more substantial shelter using fallen branches and broad leaves. Miranda watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements despite his obvious exhaustion. You've done this before, she observed. Building emergency shelters. Jack tied off a support branch. Former Marine. Force Recon. 2 tours in Afghanistan. That explains the helicopter knowledge. Crew chief on a CH-53E. He paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. Lost 4 teammates when one went down in a sandstorm. Mechanical failure we missed during inspection. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Miranda suddenly understood his insistence on triple-checking everything, his refusal to fly in dangerous conditions. That's why you became a safety technician. Jack nodded once. Never wanted another family to get that knock on the door, because I missed something. As evening approached, Miranda noticed Jack grimacing more frequently as he moved. When he stumbled slightly while gathering more firewood, she stepped forward decisively. Enough. Sit down before you collapse. Her CEO voice emerged automatically. We need more wood to last the night. And we need you conscious. Miranda took the wood from his arms. I can gather branches. You're running on fumes. For a moment, it seemed he would argue, but exhaustion won out. Jack lowered himself beside the fire, his usual stoicism cracking to reveal profound fatigue. Miranda gathered wood efficiently, adapting quickly to the task. When she returned, she found Jack staring into the flames, his daughter's photo in his hands. She'll be okay, Miranda said quietly, arranging the wood. Children are resilient. She's already had too much practice at resilience. Jack's voice was rough. After Maria died, Sophie stopped speaking for 2 months. Just silence. Therapist called it selective mutism from trauma. Miranda sat beside him, closer than she had before. What helped her? Routine. Consistency. Knowing I'd always come home. Jack carefully returned the photo to his pocket. I've never missed picking her up when I said I would. Not once in 3 years. Until now. Miranda's words were soft, not accusatory. Jack nodded, the weight of that broken promise evident in his posture. Without thinking, Miranda reached out, her hand covering his bandaged one. We'll get back. The gesture surprised them both. Jack looked at their hands, then at her face, seeing past the CEO facade to the human beneath. Why Pacific Tech? He asked. Changing the subject. You don't seem like someone who grew up dreaming of security software. Miranda almost withdrew her hand, instinctively defensive about personal questions. But something about the firelight and shared survival broke through her usual barriers. My father was an engineer who lost everything in a corporate espionage case. Someone stole his designs, and he couldn't prove it was theft. Her fingers unconsciously found the jade pendant. He died believing he was a failure. I built Pacific Tech to create security systems that would have protected him. Jack's eyes reflected understanding rather than pity. Legacy protection. Something like that. Miranda seldom shared this story, even with her executive team. The acquisition deal I'm working on would expand our systems globally. Important work. Worth flying through a storm for. She attempted a smile, acknowledging her earlier mistake. Jack didn't argue. Instead, he unexpectedly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather pouch. Here, he said, removing what appeared to be a smooth stone with a hole through its center. Sophie found this on our last camping trip. Called it her lucky seeing stone. Made me promise to carry it on every flight. He placed it in Miranda's palm, a gesture of unexpected trust. Get some rest, he said, standing with visible effort. I'll take first watch. Watch for what? We're alone on an island. Force of habit. He shrugged. Marines don't sleep well anyway. As Miranda settled onto the makeshift bed of leaves he'd prepared, She found herself turning the stone over in her fingers, this tangible piece of Jack's most precious relationship. The gesture touched her more deeply than any corporate gift or strategic alliance ever had. 3 days passed with no sign of rescue. They had established a sustainable routine, Jack fishing and maintaining their signal fire, Miranda collecting water and edible plants. The initial awkwardness had evolved into a functional partnership, punctuated by moments of unexpected connection during evening conversations around the fire. On the 4th morning, Miranda woke to find Jack already gone from the camp, his usual spot empty. Concern immediate and surprising in its intensity, she followed his footprints along the beach until she found him standing on a rocky outcropping, staring at the horizon through the emergency kit's small binoculars. "What is it?" she asked, climbing up beside him. "Storm's coming. Big one." He handed her the binoculars. "Look southeast." Miranda saw the dark wall of clouds gathering, much larger than the daily rain showers they'd experienced. "How bad?" "Bad enough that we need to move camp. This beach will flood with the storm surge." Jack's expression was grim. "There's a cave system on the north side I found yesterday. Higher ground." They spent the morning relocating their camp, carrying their limited supplies through increasingly dense jungle. Jack's leg had improved somewhat, but he still moved with a noticeable limp. Miranda found herself automatically slowing her pace to match his, something she would never have done in the corporate world. By midday, the sky had darkened ominously. Wind whipped through the trees as they finally reached the cave entrance. "We should collect more firewood before it all gets soaked," Jack said, glancing at the threatening sky. "I'll go." Miranda was already turning toward the forest. Jack's hand caught her arm. "We stick together now. Storm's coming faster than I thought." They worked rapidly, gathering armfuls of wood and carrying them to the cave's entrance. The first heavy raindrops began just as they finished, quickly escalating to a downpour that transformed the forest floor into muddy rivulets. Inside the cave, Jack built a fire near the entrance, positioning rocks to reflect heat inward while allowing smoke to escape. Miranda arranged their supplies against the back wall, well away from potential flooding. "Should last through the night," Jack said, adding the last branch to their woodpile. A tremendous crack of thunder shook the ground, followed by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. Jack rushed to the cave entrance just as a massive palm tree crashed down across the path they'd used. "That was close," Miranda observed, joining him at the entrance. Jack's expression changed as he surveyed the fallen tree. "Too close." He pointed to a section of disturbed earth. "The root system's exposed." And look! Another flash of lightning illuminated what Jack had already seen, a widening fissure in the ground near the cave entrance. "The storm's destabilizing the hillside," he said, voice tight. "This whole slope could go." Miranda processed the implication immediately. "We need to relocate." "Again. Not during this. We'd never make it through the forest in these conditions." Jack studied the cave interior. "Let's see if there's another way out." They explored deeper into the cave system, using a makeshift torch Jack created. The passages narrowed then widened again, revealing a larger chamber with a small opening visible at the far end, natural light filtering through despite the storm. "Potential exit," Jack confirmed. "But it's tight." Before Miranda could respond, the ground shook violently. A terrifying rumble echoed through the cave, as rocks began falling from the ceiling. "Landslide!" Jack shouted, grabbing her arm. "Run!" They sprinted toward the back chamber as the cave entrance collapsed behind them, dust and debris billowing through the passages. A falling rock struck Jack's shoulder, sending him stumbling. Miranda caught him instinctively, supporting his weight as they continued forward. They reached the larger chamber just as the worst of the collapse subsided. Dust filled the air, making it difficult to breathe. Jack's torch had been extinguished in their flight, leaving them in near darkness except for the faint light from the small opening. "Are you okay?" Miranda asked, still supporting Jack. He straightened, wincing. "Nothing broken." He looked back toward the now blocked passage. "But we're trapped." Miranda assessed their situation with the same clarity she applied to corporate crises. "We have the emergency pack, we have an opening for air, and we know there's a potential exit." She pointed to the small gap where light filtered through. "We can widen that." Jack studied her face in the dim light, something like respect flickering in his expression. "That's remarkably pragmatic. Panic isn't productive." She shrugged. "CEO rule number 1. Jack managed a small smile. "Marine rule number 1. Adapt and overcome." They examined the small opening, which appeared to lead to a steep hillside on the opposite side of the ridge. The gap was barely wide enough for an arm to fit through. "I can clear this," Jack said, already testing the surrounding rocks. "We'll clear it," Miranda corrected, joining him. They worked methodically, removing smaller rocks first, creating a pile behind them. Outside, the storm continued to rage, occasionally sending water trickling through their growing opening. After hours of exhausting labor, they had widened the gap enough that a person might squeeze through. Jack tested it first, getting his shoulders partway before backing out. It's tight, but possible. He looked at Miranda. You should go first. You're smaller. And leave you behind? She shook her head. We go together or not at all. This isn't a negotiation, Chen. The opening might not hold. One of us needs to get through to signal for help. Exactly why it should be you. You have survival training. And you have a multinational corporation that can deploy rescue resources. Jack's logic was irrefutable. If you get out, Sophie has a better chance of seeing me again. The mention of his daughter silenced Miranda's objections. She reached into her pocket, withdrawing the seeing stone he'd given her. I'll send the most expensive rescue team money can buy, she promised, clutching the stone. I'm counting on it. His expression softened. Sophie too. As Miranda prepared to squeeze through the opening, a new sound reached them, a deep, ominous cracking from the hillside above. Jack looked up sharply, his face paling in the dim light. The whole ridge is giving way, he said quietly. Before Miranda could process this, water began pouring through their newly created opening, not rain, but a torrent suggesting the hillside was now channeling a flash flood. Get back. Jack pulled her away just as the deluge intensified, bringing mud and debris with it. Within seconds, water was ankle-deep in their chamber, and rising rapidly. Jack grabbed the emergency pack, securing it to his back. The main passage, could we dig through where it collapsed? Miranda asked, already wading toward it. Not in time. Jack's voice was grim. Water's rising too fast. The severity of their situation crystallized. They were trapped in a rapidly flooding cave with no viable exit. Jack looked around frantically, then pointed upward. There. A ledge. Above them, perhaps 12 feet up, a rock shelf jutted from the cave wall high enough to potentially remain above the rising water. I'll boost you up, Jack said, interlocking his fingers to create a step. You'll never make it up after me with your leg. Miranda shook her head. There has to be another way. There isn't. Jack's voice left no room for argument. And my daughter needs one of us to survive to send help. The water reached their knees, then quickly their waists. Time was running out. Jack, Miranda began. Please. The single word contained everything: desperation, determination, and a father's love for his child. Miranda stepped into his hands, allowing him to boost her upward. She scrambled onto the ledge, then immediately turned to reach back down. Now you, she called. Jack attempted to jump, his injured leg hampering his effort. His fingers brushed hers, but couldn't establish a grip. The water continued rising inexorably. Find something to reach down. Jack called, now treading water. Miranda frantically searched the ledge, finding nothing long enough. She stripped off her blouse, leaving only her camisole, and dangled the fabric down. Grab on. Jack caught the material, and Miranda pulled with all her strength. For a moment, it seemed possible he rose partway out of the water, but then the fabric began to tear. It won't hold. Miranda cried. In that moment, Jack made his decision. He reached up, not for the blouse, but to press Sophie's photo into Miranda's hand. Tell her I fought to come home, he said, his eyes locked with Miranda's. Tell her I never stopped trying. No. Miranda lunged further over the edge, grasping for him. To her shock, Jack's hand shot up, catching her wrist in an iron grip. With his last surge of strength, he pulled himself upward as she pulled from above. The momentum carried him halfway onto the ledge, before his strength gave out. Miranda refused to let go. Bracing herself against the rock wall, she pulled with everything she had, ignoring the screaming pain in her previously dislocated shoulder. I am not letting you die here, she growled through gritted teeth. With a final desperate effort, they succeeded. Jack collapsed onto the ledge beside her, both gasping for breath as the water continued to rise below them. In the dim light, Miranda saw blood seeping through Jack's pant leg, his injury reopened by the exertion. Without a word, she tore strips from her already ruined blouse, binding the wound tightly. Why? Jack asked simply when he caught his breath. Miranda found Sophie's seeing stone still clutched in her palm. She placed it back in Jack's hand, closing his fingers around it. Because some promises need to be kept, she said quietly. And she needs her father to come home. Morning broke with unexpected brilliance after the storm. Sunlight filtered through the small opening in the cave, now partially cleared by the rushing water that had receded as quickly as it had risen. Jack and Miranda remained on the ledge, huddled together for warmth through the long night. Think we can try the opening again? Miranda asked, stiff from their cramped position. Jack nodded, examining the cave below. Water's down. And the flow cleared away some of the blockage. They climbed down carefully, Jack wincing as he put weight on his injured leg. Together they approached the small opening, now slightly larger from the force of the water. "Ladies first," Jack said with the hint of a smile. Miranda squeezed through the gap, emerging onto a mud-slicked hillside. The storm had transformed the landscape, toppling trees and carving new channels through the earth. But the sky above was perfectly clear, the ocean visible in the distance. She turned back to help Jack through, supporting his weight as he emerged. They stood together, blinking in the bright sunlight, alive against all odds. "Look," Jack said suddenly, pointing toward the ocean. A small dot moved across the water's surface, a boat. "They're searching the coastline," Miranda realized. She looked around frantically. "We need to signal them." Jack was already reaching for the emergency pack, retrieving the signaling mirror. He positioned it to catch the sunlight, sending flashes toward the distant vessel with practiced precision. "Come on," he muttered, adjusting the angle slightly. "See us." Minutes passed with no response. The boat continued its path, seemingly oblivious to their signals. "It's not working," Miranda said, desperation creeping into her voice. Jack didn't respond, continuing to angle the mirror methodically. His expression remained focused, refusing to acknowledge failure. Then, just as the boat seemed about to pass beyond range, it changed course, turning toward the island. "They saw us," Miranda breathed, disbelief and joy mingling in her voice. Jack lowered the mirror, his usual stoicism cracking as he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Told you, Sophie's seeing stone is lucky." Miranda found herself laughing, the sound strange after days of tension and fear. Jack joined her, the shared release of survival binding them in a moment of pure connection. The rescue itself was almost anticlimactic. A Pacific Tech search team that had been combing the islands for 3 days, coordinating with Coast Guard vessels. Miranda's status had triggered an international search effort that Jack's position alone would never have warranted. As they boarded the rescue boat, wrapped in fresh blankets and sipping hot drinks, Miranda found herself seated beside Jack, both watching the island recede. "What happens now?" Jack asked quietly. "You go home to Sophie," Miranda answered simply. "That's what matters most." Jack studied her face. "And you? Back to the acquisition and board meetings?" Miranda touched the jade pendant at her throat, considering. "Eventually. Some things need to be reassessed first." The journey back to Seattle passed in a blur of medical examinations and debriefings. Jack's leg required minor surgery, and Miranda's shoulder needed physical therapy, but they were alive, a fact that seemed increasingly miraculous as the full story of their survival emerged. 3 weeks later, Jack returned to his apartment, greeted by Sophie's crushing hug and tears. Miss Rodriguez had kept things running smoothly, but the rent notice still sat unopened on the counter, and Sophie's school had sent reminders about unpaid activity fees. That evening, as Jack tucked Sophie into bed, she clutched the seeing stone, now returned to its rightful owner. "Did it keep you safe, Daddy?" Jack smiled, kissing her forehead. "It did. And it helped me make a new friend." "The lady from the helicopter? The one who called?" Jack nodded, surprised that Miranda had kept her promise to check on them. The call had been brief but genuine, asking after Sophie, inquiring about Jack's recovery, offering resources if needed. He'd politely declined any financial help, pride still intact, despite everything. "Is she nice?" Sophie asked, fighting sleep. Jack considered the question. "She's complicated. But yes, when it matters, she's nice." The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope. Inside was a contract offering Jack a position as Chief Safety Officer at Pacific Tech's Aviation Division, with a salary 3 times his current pay. A handwritten note accompanied it. "Some systems need triple checking. Interview Thursday if interested. MC." Jack stared at the offer, emotions conflicted. The money would solve their financial problems instantly, but working for Miranda Chen meant entering her world, a world he'd judged harshly before knowing her story. 2 days later, Jack stood in the Pacific Tech Tower lobby, Sophie's seeing stone in his pocket for luck. The receptionist guided him not to HR, but directly to the executive floor. Miranda's office overlooked the same skyline as her penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city where their separate lives had once run parallel. She rose when he entered, their eyes meeting with the unspoken recognition that comes from facing death together. "You came," she said simply. "I did." Jack remained standing, still uncomfortable in the tailored suit he'd purchased for the occasion. Miranda gestured to the chair across from her desk. "The position is real. We need someone who won't compromise on safety protocols, even when executives demand it." Someone who'll say no to the CEO in a storm? Jack raised an eyebrow. Especially then. Miranda's smile held a hint of self-deprecation. The board was impressed by your credentials. Former Marine, 15 years experience, impeccable safety record. And my personality assessment? Doesn't play well with entitled executives? Actually, I listed that under essential qualities. Miranda leaned forward. This isn't charity, Torres. It's strategic. After what happened, our insurance demands stronger safety oversight. Jack nodded slowly, understanding the business logic. And the personal angle? Miranda's professional facade softened slightly. Let's just say near-death experiences clarify priorities. My father's legacy matters, but not at the cost of another father's life. She reached for something on her desk, a small, framed photograph of Jack and Sophie that he recognized from his apartment. Miss Rodriguez provided this. Hope you don't mind. It's to remind everyone what's at stake when they rush safety protocols. Jack's throat tightened unexpectedly. In that gesture, he recognized something beyond corporate strategy, a woman changed by their shared ordeal, just as he had been. Sophie wants to meet you properly, he said finally. Maybe dinner sometime. Miranda's surprise was evident, but quickly replaced by genuine warmth. I'd like that. 6 months later, Miranda sat on a park bench watching Jack coach Sophie's soccer team. Her usual weekend business attire replaced by jeans and a casual sweater, the jade pendant still at her throat. The seeing stone had found a permanent place on her desk at work, a tangible reminder that some barriers like class, wealth, and first impressions could be washed away in the face of shared humanity. Sophie scored a goal and looked immediately to the sidelines, giving an enthusiastic wave that encompassed both her father and Miranda. The child who had once fallen silent from loss now laughed freely, secure in the knowledge that promises kept were more valuable than any corporate acquisition. As Jack joined her on the bench during halftime, their shoulders touching comfortably, Miranda reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. No dramatic romance, no fairy tale ending, just two people from different worlds who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and most resilient, and recognized something worth preserving. What? Jack asked. Noticing her expression, Miranda smiled, watching Sophie with her teammates. Just thinking that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find what matters. Jack's hand found hers, calloused fingers entwining with manicured ones. And sometimes the most important safety protocols aren't in any manual. Above them, storm clouds gathered and dispersed without breaking, the sky clearing to reveal unexpected warmth in the late afternoon sun.